It wasn't until the very end that I figured out the awful truth. That cage at the market, it wasn't there for him. It was for us. To keep us dumbasses from getting too close. See, he didn't feed on coins. He fed on our past, on the memories we lock away in old things. And when he reached his hand through the bars, I knew exactly what he wanted. My only memory of my father, trapped in an old pocket knife. I could see my dad again, just for a couple of seconds. But at what cost? I stared into his vacant eyes and realized if I gave him that knife, the cage wasn't going to hold him anymore. For those of you returning to the shadows, welcome back. And to anyone brave enough to be stumbling into our corner of the internet for the very first time, you've found Eyes of Darkness, the one place where the most chilling tales are given a voice. Tonight's story has been waiting patiently in the dark, and it's dying to be told. To make sure you don't miss the next whisper crawling out of the void, do yourself a favor, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. It's the only warning you'll get. Now, get comfortable. If you can. We're about to begin. I have to tell you about the summer the cage came to the flea market. The one out by the old highway interchange. Not just any cage, but a huge, rusted thing, like it was ripped out of the cellar of some forgotten traveling circus that used to roam the county roads, scaring kids with a clown whose face was cracked porcelain. Inside the cage was him. Not a man. Or was he? That question gnawed at everyone who came to stare. We called him Husk. The name just stuck, no discussion needed. It fit. He looked like a human frame draped in skin the color of old clay, dried and strange. He squatted in the center of the cage, motionless, staring at a single point in front of him with cloudy, cataract eyes. Some carnies brought him, guys who looked like they'd drifted in from the next state over, and for a small fee to the market owner, they set him up near their stall of junk tools and faded vinyl records. An attraction. A freak.
"See the wonder the world forgot!" shouted the leader, a slick man in a stained blazer. His name was Jed. I was working at the market back then, helping my Uncle Sal unload boxes of plastic dinnerware and cheap electronics from some liquidator downtown. I was 18, and the world felt as flat and boring as a 2x4. Husk became the first truly mysterious thing in my life.
The wonder was this. If you tossed a coin into the cage with Husk, any coin, a quarter, a dime, even an old wheat penny, he would slowly, with a painful creak of his joints, turn his head. His gaze would fall on the coin, and after a few seconds, the coin changed. It was like it lived an entire lifetime in a moment. A new, shiny quarter would tarnish, turn green with verdigris, its embossed edges smoothing away. It might bend as if a truck had run over it, or, just the opposite, a dull, grimy coin would become new, polished to a mirror shine. He sped up time for them, or slowed it down. Nobody understood. People gathered, forming a crowd. Some tossed coins, laughing. Others made the sign of the cross, looking at the abomination. A few, the clever ones, tried tossing other things. A button, a key, a plastic bottle cap. It worked on those too. A key could rust over completely. A bottle cap could yellow and crack, as if left in the sun for a decade. "He don't eat, he don't drink," Jed would tell the gawking crowd, while his buddies deftly picked a few pockets in the throng.
Found him in a barn out in the sticks. Was in this very cage. Been sitting there 100 years, maybe more.
I came to the cage every day. Not for the trick. I was drawn to his face. There was no anger on it, no suffering, no resignation. Only emptiness, and that was more terrifying than any grimace. One evening, as the market was emptying out, I stayed late, helping Uncle Sal throw a tarp over his merchandise. I saw an old woman, one I hadn't noticed before, approach the cage. She stared at Husk for a long time. Then she pulled something from her purse, not a coin, but a locket, a cheap tin thing with a clouded plastic cover. She tossed it into the cage. Husk turned his head, as usual. The locket fell onto the dirty floor. And then Husk moved. Not just his head, but his whole withered body twitched. He reached out a hand, long, bony, with nails like broken shards of pottery, and touched the locket with the tip of one finger. And then Husk groaned. The sound was low, coming from deep inside him, like the creak of ancient tree limbs. The locket didn't change visually, but the old woman gasped, clutched her chest, and fell down dead. Right there on the spot. They said later it was a heart attack. The ambulance took the body. The locket was left lying in the cage. Jed, pale but ever the opportunist, used a stick to flick it out into a trash can. But I saw his face. I saw for the first time not calculation in Jed's eyes, but a raw animal fear. The next day, the story was all over the market. 3 times as many people showed up. But now they watched not with curiosity but with apprehension. Husk was no longer a novelty. He was a curse. And as always, there were those who wanted to test the curse. A few young thugs, already drinking beer at 10 in the morning, decided to have some fun. One of them, a big guy they called Tank, walked up to the cage. "What's up, Grandpa? You like shiny things? Here, chew on this." He didn't throw a coin, but a Zippo lighter, a classic chrome one. Husk turned his head. His gaze fell on the lighter, and then it began to age. The chrome flaked away, revealing the brass underneath, which instantly turned a sickly green. The casing warped and bulged, and suddenly it sparked, all by itself. The wheel turned, a spark flew, and a jet of foul, sooty yellow flame erupted from the deformed body, immediately licking at the bars of the cage. Tank jumped back. Everyone jumped back. A silence hung in the air, broken only by the quiet crackle of that strange fire, which soon extinguished itself. On the floor of the cage lay a shapeless, melted lump that had once been a Zippo. After that, Jed tried to get rid of the cage, but it turned out he couldn't. It wasn't that anyone stopped him. The cage seemed to have grown into the earth. When he and his buddies tried to shift it, thick black roots pushed up from the bottom of the cage, from the ground itself. They weren't made of wood. They were metal, rusted, just like the cage. They had wrapped around the base and plunged deep into the soil. That's when Jed, thoroughly terrified, gave up. He packed up his family and his junk and left in a hurry. He left the cage. He left Husk. He left him to us. The market began to die. The vendors, a superstitious bunch, started moving their stalls further away. Only the most desperate, or the poorest remained. And me. I couldn't leave. Something pulled me there. I couldn't resist it. I started noticing changes. The ground in a 10-yard radius around the cage turned gray, lifeless, not a blade of grass. The dust didn't stir. The air was still, thick, as if it too had been touched by the strange torpor that emanated from Husk. The crows that swarmed the market gave that spot a wide berth, and Husk began to change. He started to slowly, a millimeter a day, get bigger, not grow, swell? No. It was as if he was absorbing the space around him, becoming denser and more real than everything else. The climax, the thing I have to tell so that at least someone remembers how it was, came on a blistering August afternoon. The market was nearly empty. Just me, Uncle Sal, and a couple of drunks sleeping in the shade of a stall. A young woman in a simple dress walked up to the cage. I'd seen her before. She sold knitted socks and mittens. In her hand, she held not a coin, but a single tiny child's sneaker, blue with a worn-out sole. The woman went right up to the bars. Her face was wet with tears, but she wasn't sobbing. She looked at Husk with such desperation and such hope that my blood ran cold. "They say you can touch time," she whispered, so quietly I only heard because of the dead silence. "Can you? My little girl, Lily, she was 4. The truck, if you could, just a little bit back, a moment, 1 second, so she could take 1 step back." She tossed the little sneaker into the cage. Husk reacted instantly. All his stillness vanished. He lunged forward, not bending, but sort of sliding on his bony limbs. His hands snatched the sneaker, and he pressed it to the part of his torso where a heart should have been. And then it began. The worn fabric of the sneaker instantly disintegrated, turning to dust. The laces crumbled. From the dust, in the air above Husk's palms, something began to appear. First, a faint outline, a patch of shimmering, distorted light. Then I heard a sound, a child's laugh, clear and bright. And then, an image, a little girl in a yellow summer dress. She was running somewhere, laughing, looking back over her shoulder. It lasted 2, maybe 3 seconds. Then the image flickered, distorted, and dissolved into nothing, just like the sneaker. But the woman had seen her Lily. She cried out, a short, sharp sound, as if a knife had been driven between her ribs, and fell to her knees, staring into the empty space before the cage, her face as vacant as Husk's. He hadn't brought her daughter back. He had only shown her the essence of that moment, ripped it from the stream of time, and presented it as evidence. And that evidence killed everything living inside her. And Husk changed again. He was bigger, physically. His frame seemed to expand, taking up more space in the cage. The rusted bars bowed slightly outward with a low, threatening groan. He had absorbed that moment, that particle of someone else's terrible time, and it had become his fuel. He didn't feed on coins, but on the attachment embedded in objects. He fed on memory, preserved in things. And the stronger the memory, the sharper the pain or joy tied to the object, the more power he gained. I understood everything. Husk wasn't a creature. He was a phenomenon, a knot of time turned inside out, a black hole for memories. He sat and waited for people to bring him pieces of their past so he could devour them and grow. And the cage wasn't for him. The cage was for us, so that we, fools that we were, wouldn't get too close and become his food ourselves. The woman was later led away, and I was left alone before the cage. Husk slowly turned his featureless head toward me. His cloudy eyes seemed to focus on me. He extended a hand through the bars. Not to grab. The hand just hung in the air, palm up. In my pocket was my father's old case pocket knife, the one with the bone handle. Dad died when I was 10. The knife was the only thing I had left of him. I remembered him fixing my bike with it. I remembered it lying on the nightstand in the hospital, the day he passed. All my memory of my father, all the unspoken grief of an 18-year-old kid who never got to become a man in his father's eyes. It was all in that piece of steel and bone. I pulled out the knife, then looked at Husk, at his outstretched hand, at the void that was his face. And I knew what would happen if I threw the knife into the cage. He would show me my father. For a moment, he would tear that instant out of oblivion and throw it in my face. And then he would absorb it and become even bigger, even more real. And maybe the cage wouldn't hold. Clenching the knife in my fist until my knuckles were white, I took a step back. Then another. I turned and walked away without looking back. I didn't go to the market the next day. I got a different job. A month later, passing by, I saw that the market grounds had been closed off with a chain-link fence. Word was the county had stepped in. They'd kicked out the last of the vendors. No one talked about the cage. I walked up to the fence, found a gap. There, in the empty field where life once teemed, stood a single structure, the huge, rusted cage. And inside it, having straightened up, now occupying almost the entire space, sat something that resembled a statue, but it was bigger now, much bigger. Its gaze was fixed upward, at the sky, as if waiting for something to fall from there too. I left, and eventually left the state altogether. But sometimes I think that somewhere out there, a quiet, insatiable god of rusted iron and stolen moments is growing. And that one day, the cage will be too small for him. And the cities, with all their old photographs, letters, toys, wedding rings, and treasured keepsakes, are spread out all around, like a free buffet for the thing that eats the past. And there will be nothing to stop it.